Hello, and welcome back to Prism and Company. On the docket today, we are going to take a look at the story of the majors through the OceanDry Tarot. Now, if you saw my last video, or I suppose it's a previous video at this point, I talked about the numbering system and why I remajored all the cards in the deck. And I talked just very briefly about how that changed something called the Fool's Journey. Now, if you're familiar with tarot, you've almost certainly heard of the Fool's Journey before. It is kind of the narrative that a traditional tarot deck tells, where you start with card number 0, the Fool, and then watch as the Fool works his way through the entire major arcana until he discovers or becomes or inherits, or whatever you want to say, the world. And, it's this cool, awesome cyclical journey. And then it starts over again, as these things so often do. But because these cards are all rearranged in the OceanDry, there is a different narrative. And that honestly is the thing that I am most excited about and most proud of in this deck. Now, I fully intend to do another video on this where I break down what I think this means, but I really want this to stand alone as just the narrative itself. I will be showing you the cards from the major arcana and talking you through the narrative so you can just experience it as I hope people will, just the story. And then later on, at another date, we'll talk about why this new story. Thank you so much for joining, everybody. I will not check back in with you at the end. I'm just gonna let the narrative be what it is. I would love to hear what you think, and I'd love to hear what you think it means. Cool. Well, I'll say goodbye to you now, but I so hope you guys enjoy. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye. You wake up, and you don't remember falling asleep, but here you are. You wake up. And the world is dark and cold and kind of damp. And as you try and take in your surroundings, you look up and you see the moon in a pitch black sky, shining brighter than you've ever seen it. And you feel the earth under your feet, damp, cold, packed hard. And then your eyes begin to adjust. Because the moon shining so bright shouldn't be up there in the sky, not without any stars. And you move your body and stand and feel that packed earth ends and hits walls straight up and down. And then your head hits the wood that was covering the ceiling just above you. And you realize that moon you saw was nothing more than the sun poking through the hole of a wooden plank. The first of many things you'll realize weren't quite what they seemed. But the whole time while you're getting up, you couldn't help but think that you heard a voice, someone talking to you, but you just couldn't hear what they were saying. So you push, and a hatch opens above you, and the sky reveals itself for what it is. Bright, unyielding. The heat from the surrounding area is sweltering and pours into the root cellar like it was liquid fire. And you pull yourself to the surface and take in your surroundings. Old, ancient ruins amidst an endless sea of desert sand. The desert is hard and unyielding, but it's very clear the situation you're in, a dire one. You're the only person here. You take stock of your surroundings for minutes, then hours, then days. You become familiar with the ruins understand their ebb and flow. You find stones to shelter yourself. You find slabs to dry whatever little scraps of food you can find. But you never find water. Then you find a ring of stones on the outskirts of town, just butting up to the edge of where the desert finally begins. And you turn your attention to one stone in particular, an odd stone that seems older than the rest, off by itself. All the stones are worn, but this one seems eroded, perhaps from the wind and the sand blowing. But it's smooth, and on its surface are strange markings, things you don't understand, but know are important. Behind the stone, the sky stands in all of its immensity, clouds billowing but not yielding any rain. You stand for a long time, waiting for the stone to speak, but it doesn't, because like everything here, it has long since died, moved on. And you realize that you have to move on as well. There's nothing for you here. If you hope to survive, you'll have to find life and food and water. So you go, because there's nothing else to do. There is no other choice to make if you're going to survive. But you are completely unprepared for what the desert has for you, for that endless sky, for that relentless sand. And as you crest the first dune, the world around you turns to a sea as mirages of heat take the sand away and turn the endless dunes into ocean waves. It's a lonely feeling on the surface of the ocean with no one in sight, no hope, no rescue, no understanding of where you are. And when those illusions leave you, you can see the desert for all it is. Boundless sky, endless sand, and you, and nothing else. Forever, in every direction, nothing but sand and sky. And for the first time, maybe in your entire life, you feel small. Small in a way that you have never felt before. You feel the immensity of the world and the weight of that size and how completely insignificant you are on its surface. And then you walk. Because you have to. Because if you don't, you will die in the desert. And that's not an option. So you walk. You walk along this monolith that floats through the sky. You're nearly in tears as night falls, and the sweet relief of darkness takes away just some of the heat, until it takes too much, and you start to freeze. The desert is an unyielding place, a place that is difficult to traverse when prepared, nearly impossible to when not. You look desperately for water, but still can't find any. Even after weeks, still not being able to find any. And then something odd happens. In the moon glow, you see something fall, gently, from the sky above down to the sand in front of you. A shell. You approach, expecting it to disappear, just like all the other mirages have before. But it doesn't. It stays. And you pick it up. And suddenly there's hope. Something lived in this shell before. There's nothing there now, but it reminds you that other things can live, that it is not you alone in this desert forever. It's just you alone in this desert now. And that joy fills you as you fall asleep, and you forget that the shell fell down from the sky. Not worried about that, because right now, it's the only thing you've got to keep you going. Time passes all at once, very quickly and very slowly. Days turn to night, and nights turn to day. You watch stars pass, and time move and not move. You count the days and then forget them, because you have no way to chronicle your journey. But all the while, you hold the shell in your hand, desperate to keep it safe from the elements. Your only companion, a blessed burden on your journey through this hostile place. But the desert is not so unyielding. Life grows in unexpected places, and you find plants, small grasses, little twigs, cactuses, stones that you can use as tools. You gain courage and knowledge. You're no longer afraid of the desert. You are simply a traveler on the desert. You learn how to traverse its many dunes, stay warm in the nights, stay cool in the days, and collect slowly your resources. And as this confidence in you grows, that voice speaks to you again. The one that you heard when you first awoke in the root cellar. But you're too busy collecting stones to hear the voice. Then a long way into your journey, you find a cave. Beautiful relief from the sun. And the cave is completely filled with vegetation, with life. You have used your shell as a tool to cut grass, to stay alive. It has been your companion and friend, so you hastily use it to chop at the thick stalks. And it breaks. The shell that has carried you through the desert, and that you have carried through the desert, cracks in your hand. Still in shock, you set it down at your feet, next to the dozens of sharpened stones you could have used instead. You found a cave, but you lost your hope. The sun sets, and you bury your friend. The pieces of the shell fit neatly into the small earthen tomb you dig for it. And you feel sick. Sick from eating so much, from consuming so many of the plants. You start to sweat. And you think, I'll just stay here and die. But then as the sun gets lower and lower, you realize that you've come this far, and you have not come this far to give up. So you leave what you found behind. You leave the plants and the cave, and you venture out into the night. You crest a sand dune and gaze up at the moon. The very first thing you did in the desert was look at the moon, or so you thought. But now you can see it, full and bright in the sky. And it almost calls to you. But the fever takes over. The illness you've caught from the plants takes you, and your vision begins to blur. And you have nothing to do but sleep atop the dune and go inside. You dream, a fever dream of being on the sea, a captain at the helm of the ship amidst ocean waves, and the sun blazes like a trumpet from behind the clouds. It illuminates the ocean spray all around you. And in the distance, as you sail, you see another ship. Another ship far in the distance that seems safe. Not a combatant, but hope. Other people. Someone else to save you. But then you remember you're sleeping. And as dreams often do when you remember, it begins to dissolve. The next day comes to you in waves. You fight for consciousness as the dream attempts to take hold, the water and the ocean spray. But you fight for reality and consciousness, the wind and the desert heat. All the while as you travel, that boat never leaving your sight, the one that you saw from your vision, constantly just out of reach, mocking you, reminding you that you're still dreaming. But the vision fades. The water recedes. It dissipates like mirages, but the boat does not. And then you arrive. You see its time-withered deck emerging from the sand, and you hold out your hand to touch the wood, not wanting to believe that it's real. But you let your fingers touch its surface, and your heart flutters when it doesn't vanish. You enter the ship to find a damp, cool oasis, bursting with life. Plants grow inside and outside, over and through every crevice and crack. You lay down your tools, things that you found in the desert, and thank whatever there is left to thank. And you eat, and you rest, and you realize this is a safe place. And then one day, as you lay on the deck of the ship, you hear it. That voice. The same voice you couldn't hear in the desert because of your work. The voice that you heard when you first opened your eyes in the root cellar. And your heart skips a beat because someone is here. They were just asleep or away or not speaking. Maybe they were afraid, and you know that they're on the boat, so you go running and looking for the person who will save you, for the person who will just be there and be alive in the middle of this desert with you. But there's no one. It's just you. And that's when you lay down on the deck of the ship in the hot, bright sun. And you see flocks of birds fly over your head. And you close your eyes, and you don't intend to ever open them again, as the hot sun bakes on your skin. as you lay there in the sun, with your eyes closed, you wince, because something covers the light shining on your face and then moves on. And you open them, half expecting to see somebody looking back down at you. But all you catch is the tail of a fish. And you look up and you see it swimming gently through the air all around you. And then another. And your mind reels as you see seaweed growing on the boat. Seeing it for the first time as seaweed, and looking up at the schools of fish that swim above you, that just a moment ago looked like flocks of birds. You move, you sit up, but the resistance of the water takes you. The unbelievable force and pressure that surrounds you. This feeling of weight and aloneness, now crippling water pressure. You move your hands and crabs flurry off the deck. You see dark swells above you as ocean waves crash and block the moonlight. You realize you're not in the desert. You're at the bottom of the ocean. And there you sit in the water, taking in the immensity. You look left and right, and in front of you and behind you, and all of it is endless water. And then you swim up, and you feel your legs leave the deck of the ship. And you look up, boundless in a whole new dimension, something you couldn't have possibly imagined before. And then you realize your way out is not through, but up. And you rise and swim, slow at first, tentatively, unsure of what will happen. And that's when it happens. You remember falling down through the water, falling into this place. You remember careening through the tides and settling into the root cellar. You remember back on your journey at each moment. You remember the sunken ruins that you woke up in, and the strange stone depicting the surface of the ocean and its sandy bottom below. You remember seeing the truth for just a moment when you left, and then thinking that it was the desert, but all the time traversing the sandy floor. You remember the shell that fell from somewhere higher and floated gently down through the water till it landed at your feet. You remember traveling through the ocean, feeling weight and pressure of the actual water around you. You remember finding seaweed and grasses, things that you could find in any ocean bed, just enough to keep you going. And you remember drinking water, constantly drinking water because you never needed it. You remember finding an ocean cave filled to the brim with life. You remember leaving, burying your shell behind and going back onto the sea floor. You remember looking up at the moon and not understanding it, but seeing something, seeing someone looking back down at you. And then you had the dream of where you were before you fell, on the surface of the water with the sun beating down. And your mind fought to keep that truth alive, but Your perception constantly pulled you back to where you were, back to the sea. And then finally, you found the boat, the sunken ship at the bottom of the ocean where you would learn what your fate was. And you rise. And you float with this new knowledge, feeling weightless. Then it occurs to you that you can't breathe underwater, and a thick red panic chokes you. Your foot gets tangled on a boat's rope, loose from the mast, and there you float, just above the boat that gave you hope and understanding. Now you're drowning and stuck. But then you realize you've been in the ocean the whole time, and you've been breathing just fine. You don't know how or why, but it doesn't matter. You let your body relax, and the rope gently and slowly untangles itself as you float effortlessly up towards the surface. And there you hang in the middle of the ocean, with as much water up above and down below you as there is to the side. And you stay there for a while. Then you see light pouring in from the mountainous cresting waves above you. You swim desperately towards the surface as the sea churns, pulling you up, pushing you down, spinning you, keeping you from your goal. But you push hard. You push towards the glistening moonlight that shines through the water. And then finally you surface, and you see the light. But it isn't coming from up above. It's coming from you. And you look down at the ocean floor below, casting your moonlight onto its surface. And you see yourself, lost and afraid and sleeping, in the root cellar of some old ruin. And you whisper to yourself, "It's okay, just swim." But you don't think that they hear it. So you say it one more time, just a little louder. And then you wake up. And you watch with pain in your eyes as you don't leave those ruins for days. And you laugh when you finally get to the desert and see yourself wandering around, lost in mirage. And you see yourself losing hope. So you drop a shell down, something to remind yourself that there is other life. And finally, when you feel confident, you whisper again, "Just swim." But you're too busy and can't hear it. So you wait. You wait until you find a boat, somewhere safe. And then, while you're resting, while it's silent, you finally can hear yourself think, "Just swim." And you see your eyes open on the deck of the ship. And as you smile on the top of the water, you wake up. and it's dark. And you look up at the black sky and see the moon. But you smile, because you're pretty sure that it's not the moon.